Welcome to the Audio Equipment Podcast. My name is Griffin Brashears, an audio engineer obsessed with uncovering the stories behind the tools used to shape the musical landscape of the past, present, and future. Today I'll be joined by Mark Fouxman of Samar Audio Design, an innovator, highly skilled concert pianist, including prestigious music festivals across Europe, professor of piano, and leading voice in the field of microphone design. Dr. Mark Fouxman not only achieves precision and technical ingenuity in the field of audio capture, but highlights its beauty as well. Samar Audio Design is based in Salt Lake City, Utah, where Mark's designs are hand-built in the USA with an emphasis on artisanal craftsmanship guided by cutting-edge engineering. Every aspect of production is done in-house, including the machining, assembling, and even winding their own toroidal and bobbin transformers. Aiming not to mimic classic designs, but instead venturing to create unique, enduring classics of their own, Samar's focus is on pushing the envelope of great sound capture from a wisdom earned by years of Mark's research on the finest details of microphone design. Thanks for coming on the show, Mark. Great to have you.
Great to see you and great to be with you. And it is also my pleasure.
Oh my goodness. We had a great conversation at NAMM. I got to check out your microphones firsthand and check out the line. Really phenomenal stuff. You're doing some of the most innovative and unique designs in all of microphones with your newer condensers as well as your ribbons. And I just want to kind of get to know how you got started on this musical journey. I know you're a very well-renowned piano player, very highly skilled concert pianist. And how did that kind of take form in your life? What was the start of your musical journey?
Well, it was pretty logical from the very beginning because both my parents musicians and my dad was a piano professor at music college.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was a music theory professor.
A match made in heaven, yeah.
Yeah, so it is. It comes from my parents. And of course, and we are talking about classical music.
Of course.
Yeah, so from very early age, I don't even remember. I was probably 2 or 3 or 4 years old kid, and I already was listening Mozart operas, like piano, since my dad was a pianist, lots of classical piano music, greatest classical piano performers, and also orchestral music. My dad really loved, so it was not only his profession, but it also was his passion. And in our house always was sounding the finest example.
Oh yeah, beautiful music. Yeah, coming from all corners, I bet.
Their performances. So basically, it came absolutely naturally, and then I started playing piano myself, and
just grew from there.
My dad was a very professional teacher, so I was studying with him, which was, of course,
yeah. I was about to say it's when you say that, it's really only one way that can go. It's probably tough teacher.
Yeah, I actually, when I had my own kids already, I decided I don't, and we were talking about that I start teaching them piano, but then after thinking about it, like looking back, like my relationship with my dad. So I really wanted, like with my own kids, I really wanted this relationship of father and son or father and daughter.
Rather than teacher and student.
Yeah. and it is totally different relationship. So, but
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how it happened with me. So, and I had great teachers in conservatory.
Hmm.
I was going to Moscow Conservatory,
Wow,
and
very well renowned.
oh yeah,
People who know, you know.
yes,
Yeah.
it is. Especially at that time, it was the music school number one in the world.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
For that style of
in
music, absolutely.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think it was even more respected, at least at that time, than Juilliard's or Manhattan School of Music in New York, which are phenomenal schools
Hmm.
on their own merit.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I feel like Russia has had a very long lineage of really prioritizing that side of the arts and classical and the
Oh, yeah.
technical kind of side of
Classical
that.
music, ballet, and those
Hmm.
things
Yeah, ballet
were a
especially.
landmark
Hmm.
of Soviet, at that time, Soviet education.
Yeah, I was about to say it was what chess and classical is what me as a Western person associate with that era of Russian culture in
Yes,
in
absolutely,
the more
yes.
studious kind of language. So moving in from that, what are your earliest memories of recording music and becoming fascinated with, audio equipment from that background of, listening to and then playing and then, falling in love with classical music?
You know what? I cannot even remember when I recorded. Of course, I was recording.
Hmm.
My first guinea pig was myself.
Of course, as
So,
one
of
is.
course, I wanted to first record myself and just to know how it sounds from the side.
Hmm.
And that was the time when the market has not been yet flooded with those cheap microphones.
Oh yeah, it was a totally different time, even just from a
Was
manufacturing
totally
perspective.
different era. Yeah, that was 70s or
Hmm.
80s of last century. Wow, it's like, it's hard to believe it's
I know
been
you blink
almost half
once
of
and
a century. Yeah,
yeah.
and so the microphones were very expensive.
Oh yes.
This is the first thing, and probably everyone knows that Russia, or it's not even Russia, it was a Soviet Union of
Hmm.
those
Oh yeah.
years. It was time of total deficit, and it was impossible to find quality microphones or quality equipment, recording equipment. I remember a recording on like using not even semi-pro or like totally consumer grade reel-to-reel and cassette recorders. So trying to use anything to get some kind of more or less intelligible
Oh yeah.
uh,
Really pushing
recordings.
as
Yeah.
far as you can to get something out of that equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was impossible to find condenser microphones, and they were very popular for reel and cassette recorders. Like they were coming with some kind of horrible old Soviet microphones.
Oh yeah. Like
So
wire
the
recorders
very
almost.
yeah, and the quality was like, how to say, nothing to write home
Yeah,
about.
in a polite way. And it's funny, a lot of the current musical acts that want maybe a lo-fi sound would love some of that stuff now. It's funny how all of these things kind of come in waves,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, things are
Aesthetic
really,
compliments, you know.
yeah, the things do really change, and that kind of confirms this saying, all new is well forgotten old.
Oh, that's yep. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, but in any case, yeah, so those were two things which I really was interested in recording.
Hmm.
Like, first, to hear myself, to record my own recitals or performances, and also to kind of to get quality microphones which allow to get more professional recordings.
Totally. I mean, if you can't buy them, you might,
Yeah,
for a
you could
fair
not.
cost, you might
Even
as
even
well build
Yeah,
them.
even
Yeah.
if you had money, you could not buy at that time those. And after that, I was, because of this deficit, not only for recording, but also for reproduction. So I was very interested in high quality hi-fi equipment.
Absolutely.
Uh, but also it was total deficit of that. I was building myself like transport, including transport from scratch, cassette and reel to
Wow.
reel recorders. I was building amplifiers, preamplifiers, turntables. And so I got really into hi-fi, which I think also was extremely important for my development as the engineer.
Absolutely.
And also, one of the main reasons it's ear training.
Definitely. And learning how something is going to be reproduced, it gives you a really good insight
Exactly.
onto how you voice your
Yes.
recordings.
Exactly, precisely. Yeah. So I like, for example, you build an amplifier, and after that you are being it with another. Let's say somebody brought from Japan, or sometimes people were traveling, and of course they were the very important. The first thing they were bringing some hi-fi equipment, video recorders, because we didn't have anything like that in Soviet Union of that time. So yeah, somebody would bring, I don't know, Sony or Yamaha or whatever amplifier, and after that we were listening to my amplifier, then comparing it to another
Oh
amplifier.
yeah.
And yeah, but it's, I think this a being itself was much more important because it really developed this critical listening and ear training to listen for, first of all, to listen for, and also recognize those very often very small differences in sound.
Absolutely. It takes so much focus and so much, passion at the same time,
Oh,
really, to
absolutely.
really be like, oh, I prefer this, or I like this, or this is falling short here. And having that critical ear, I think, is probably one of the most important things for any equipment maker. It's important for audio engineers, of course, but for equipment makers, I think to have a really fine sense of what they like and what they don't like, that just comes from years of really agonizing and analyzing over signal. Sounds like you
Yeah,
got that
absolutely.
experience.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And, it is very often, it is very obvious that this piece of equipment was made by an excellent electronic engineer,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
but the one who does not listen.
Hmm.
Do you
Definitely.
see what I mean?
Yeah, you can usually tell when someone is more interested in maybe what's going on in the circuit than what's coming out on the other end and being reproduced.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but I think that this, first of all, my music and pianistic background together with this constant training my ear for critical listening of the music reproduction probably were the most important steps in getting where I am now. Let's
Yeah.
put it this way.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And it shows in the products that you have. I think that there's a
Thank
musicality
you.
to a lot. I mean, I'm a huge fan of your products and what I've used of them. And I think that with all of the Samar stuff, there is a certain musicality that isn't just, it's accurate, it's reference grade, it's capturing what's there, but it's doing so in such a pleasant and such a musical way. The voicings are really inspired, and I'm frequently impressed by how you're able to balance those things. There's no everything is so true to life, but it's almost like romantically true to life and a lot of that stuff. And I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but I really do just like and appreciate the
Thank
stuff
you.
that you make. And I think that the more people find out about things like that, it really adds like some beauty to any music studio, regardless of if it's a home recording studio or a larger studio. Having something that's an original product with original designs, going for something unique from kind of an artisanally guided ear like yourself. I'm passionate about that. Nothing wrong with being inspired by classics or having inspiration from lines that have come before, but something that dares to do something really unique and different, I think deserves like an especially good highlight and discussion around that. That's why I was so excited to have you on the show. Hearing directly about your wealth of experience making these things is inspiring to me. Your microphones are an inspiration to
Oh,
recording
thank
the
you.
beauty of capturing sound.
Thank you.
Speaking of those microphones, what made you gravitate towards ribbon microphones? Were those the first types of microphones you tried to make? And how did your interest move into building other styles of microphones from ribbon microphones?
Uh, yeah, my move to ribbon microphones was also very natural because when building hi-fi equipment, I was making it, I was doing it for a living. I also was building speakers, and one of the types, I was building electrostatic speakers, then regular con, and actually I even at some point, I built plasma speakers, plasma tweeters. If you heard about
Yeah,
uh,
that's some heady engineering.
this is yes, but it is also very unique sound of its own because there is nothing else like that.
I can imagine.
So, one of the speakers, so I was interested more in unconventional speakers, and at that time, ribbon speakers were quite rare. So that's why this transition from ribbon speakers to ribbon microphones was a very natural step, and also why I thought that ribbon microphones have so much potential. At that time, ribbons were an example of an old sound, old, because if we take ribbon microphones, like classical example of ribbon microphone is very thick bottom end.
Yeah, huge proximity
And
effect.
yeah, huge proximity. Well, I mean, you cannot jump over physics
Yeah,
law.
the figure eight. Yeah,
Yeah, but also very rolled off top end.
very
And
much so.
I started. So, being a concert pianist, of course, I always thought whenever I get a microphone, any microphone,
Hmm.
is how it will capture piano
Of
and grand
course.
piano. piano, and not only grand piano, but 9-foot
Yeah. The
concert
beautiful.
Steinway
Yeah.
in a good hall. Yeah, because that's usually what you get. But like especially in US,
Hmm.
most of the venues have concert Steinway, and
Hmm.
of course the classical ribbon not quite suited for the task
Yeah, I think that's a
because
good way to say it.
yeah, you need the brilliance of the instrument and all those things. So I started to. It took me a few years to learn the ribbon microphones and to see all the everything what it can, and it turned out that it actually can do much more than what we know with the old applications of ribbons, of classic application of the ribbon microphones. So, and yeah, the very first model was MF65.
It's a really striking model, and I think that those models are kind of the first time I personally ever heard of ribbon microphones with that kind of extended natural top end. Like I think
Yeah.
that is an innovation that you can claim, really,
Oh,
as far
yes,
as
it was.
yeah.
It was totally. Basically, it was a new word in ribbon microphones because, and actually, up until now,
Hmm.
MF65. I love that was my first baby,
Oh yeah, it's
so to
the first
say.
child. Yep.
Yeah, and it is still, people call it one of the finest ribbon microphones ever made.
It
So,
deserves that title. It's a beautiful
thank
microphone.
you. Yes. And if the classic ribbons, they usually would have a roll off starting at between 5 and 8K.
Hmm.
And it's linear, so it's 6 dB per octave roll off. MF65 was flat. It's actually at 25K, it had plus 2 dB.
It's
And
a little bit of extra sparkle. Yeah.
yeah, and
My
but
goodness.
I think
Mhm.
it was going at least up to 40K, but the
Measuring equipment are gonna have more variance than you could probably even record at that point. Yeah.
yeah, it was, of course, absolutely unheard
Hmm.
for a ribbon microphone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so nobody even thought that ribbon microphones can do that. So that was a very successful model, and we up until now, I'm using this microphone as a reference for everything else what we do.
Totally. It's a great voice thing, and I think that you know what you like at this point. And being a classical musician and concert pianist guides you into this place where you're able to discern really, really fine details. There's something about the classical folks that
Oh yeah.
they have an ear for that really fine detail that I feel like has to be fleshed out almost like in that field, like people who record classical music primarily and do, more symphonic work even. There's a
Oh yeah,
specific
absolutely.
there's a
This is,
naturalness you have to have,
yeah.
and if it deviates too far from what's there in real life, it does
Mhm.
not pass this quality check.
Yeah, and our VL 373 and 373A, which is an active version, they designed it's kind of deviation from the MF65, and those stereo microphones
Hmm.
are still an industry standard for orchestral recordings and like orchestral music, choir music. And ribbons naturally have this, what they call reach. So even very far away, sources or sounds, they still capture very naturally and with great details and precision. So that's why for orchestral work, it's really good.
Yeah, they're brilliant. I mean, the transient response is much more natural.
Yes, it's a very good, not synthesis, how to say it.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so like you put ribbon, stereo ribbon in Bloom line in front of the orchestra. You put a couple riggers,
Yeah.
and you have the highest quality recording.
I think ribbon microphones, pretty much up until you started working with these innovative designs, I think they were seen as this coveted kind of old school, warmth. And a lot of the higher fidelity designs do still capture a lot of that, especially because of that proximity effect and kind of more beautiful low end. But really, it's the transient response and how a ribbon reacts to sound that gives it that natural edge. I think that different mics are good at different things, as I know you're a big proponent of, different microphone designs naturally being, physically better at, doing certain things. And I think that the ribbon really does have this beautiful attack and like way of capturing a space in this like time domain that's just really rich and really natural. And I think that it's tough sometimes for other microphone designs to capture it in quite the same way.
That's true. And one of the really great qualities of the ribbon microphone as a media, the ribbon is exposed to, it actually is suspended in the air, and there is no chamber. Like, for example, in condenser microphones, which restricts the movement of the diaphragm.
Totally. So you
So
get more of a natural response.
it's a very natural response without any hint of compression, which is inevitable when we have a back chamber
Totally.
or any artifacts like that.
Absolutely. As far as condenser microphones, how did you move into kind of creating those from your established line of ribbons? I know you have the MG32, MG33 transformerless series and the MG20, which is a transformer coupled JFET design that you've just released, and they look and sound absolutely stellar. Anyone who's listening, definitely go check out the shootouts. There was this amazing snare drum shootout on YouTube if you look for the MG series, and it's really incredible. And how did you kind of move into making condenser microphones from ribbon microphones? What struck your curiosity to explore those?
Well, you know what? It is much more like when I started working with ribbon microphones. One of the reason was also my curiosity. What are they really capable of? So, of course, I knew the all the drawbacks of the design of the ribbon microphone as a media, as a design.
Yeah.
So, as we talked, this very thick bottom end and lack of top end. So once I was able to make the microphone, which kind of totally overcame those two drawbacks, at this point, I am very interested and curious how the condenser microphone technology can be improved and moved forward. Because, for example, I do not have any interest in copying like old 50, some 80 years old designs, because there is so much room for development, for further development. And like we have modern materials, we have also modern knowledge, which allows you to move the industry rather forward
Hmm.
than just keep cloning. And making inspired,
Yeah,
so-called inspired design.
inspired by, yeah, makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
so you see, there are so many examples on the market of that kind of approach that, I mean, I don't see any interest. I don't have any interest of going this path because there is nothing unique about this approach.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, you want to
and
create
I'm
something more forward thinking.
exactly, and there are so many ways of improving old designs, and of course, I mean, of course, whenever you go forward, it's always based on previous knowledge.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say.
Exactly, exactly. But I think it is very important also at some point to let it go and
Dare to do something new. Yeah.
go and do, as they say, do your own mistakes.
I love that. Yeah. No, I think that a lot of innovation comes from those things. And, I don't think that people in the 1940s and 1950s were thinking, man, I wish we could make a microphone as good as they made in the 1920s. People were thinking about how can we make what we're doing better. And I think at a
Yeah,
certain point, there became such a romantic attachment to the sound of some of these great microphones, and they are great microphones from that era, between the 1940s and 1970s or 80s. That I think that people want to capture a little bit of that magic, but the magic really was in the innovation that created those microphones, I think personally.
absolutely.
And so
Yes.
moving forward with new microphones, right, it makes to me sense to want to do something like that for this era where maybe people will look back in 30 or 40 years and yeah, they'll definitely look back in 30 or 40 years and be like, hey, remember those incredible Samar designs that were trend setting, or other microphone companies that are creating brand new things that people can use to create amazing stories of their own in music. I think that's such a beautiful goal.
Well, yes, that's basically it is rather my curiosity what is possible to do. And I am going a few different directions. And on one hand, and all our of course, the heart of any condenser microphone, I mean, any microphone is a transducer.
Hmm.
And in condenser microphone, we are talking about capsules. And yeah, at some point, I was, instead of making microphones for many years, I was servicing all kinds of microphones, starting from modifying existing microphones. And also, I serve all the Neumanns, all AKG models, not to mention, probably, through my hands went virtually every ribbon microphone
Yeah,
ever
I can
made.
imagine there maybe isn't a lot of people in the world who have used or heard more ribbon microphones than yourself. I think
Yeah,
you
because,
might be
well,
number one in that
just by
department.
nature of my business, yeah.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, when you service, and I really, with all designs, I was trying to stay true to the microphone designer intention. And like, for example, we went with B&O microphones, I found the way to make the original piston
Oh wow.
design.
I don't think there's really anybody else that I know that services.
Yes, we were the only the company of the market who was making piston ribbons, and like for example, the Bayer ribbon microphones. We also were ribboning with original piston corrugation, and later resulted in our own AL95, which is also a piston corrugated
Totally. Yeah,
ribbon.
wonderful
And,
microphone. Definitely next on my
absolutely.
acquisition list. I think that again, yeah, you really nailed the really extended frequency response without losing what makes a ribbon microphone really special.
Yeah, but that's also how we stand out on the market because most of the uh, it's strange, even with the ribbons, lots of designs are based on. Yeah, there are lots of ribbon microphones on the market, and most of them have this old school voicing, like fake classic sound of the
Hmm.
ribbon. Which is also totally fine. That's why we are not going that direction because people already making those. So we want to do something which stands out.
Absolutely, that makes
So
sense.
that's why all our ribbon microphones go this direction of very extended top end and more controlled bottom end. And also it's a little bit, well, not little bit, but probably much easier for us than for other manufacturers because you mentioned about machining,
Hmm.
and we do all the machining in-house. And actually, I am myself program every single part of our microphones, and very often I am standing next to the machine, both CNC lathe and also CNC milling machine. And I know how to make those parts myself. So we do not outsource any machining parts. So that's why it is, at least in this respect, all our process is much more controllable, so to say.
Absolutely, yeah, having a
And so
more
if we
consistency.
have, for example, I am so versed in programming. So if we need some kind of change in the design or making a new part, it takes us just half a day
Hmm.
just to write the program and start to finish, proof the program and make the part. And this luxury, very few manufacturers have this luxury.
Yeah, you're kind of in this great position where you can be really flexible with your designs, but also kind of keep the overhead costs a little bit lower than other manufacturers just because
That's
you do
true.
everything in house, right? So it's the labor, it's the time on top of the material costs. And you also make so much in house, like, not just the machining or anything like that, but also the transformers that you hand wire and yeah.
Yes, and actually, not only customers, but even lots of electronic engineers. They kind of, there is this mystic,
Yeah, a little
scary
bit.
part with transformers, but I feel very comfortable with them because I've been studying them a
Yeah,
lot.
starting in hi-fi. Yeah, starting in hi-fi audio and
Yes, and
learning
as we
amplification. Yeah.
know, as they say, the sound is in iron.
Yeah, they do say that classic iron, especially with your background in, coming from the Soviet Union. I feel like, if there are a lot of innovations and things that came from there of that nature in that kind of era, there was so many different transformer designs that have kind of popped up over the years.
Yes, yes. And also, one of the things is ribbon microphones are naturally should be working with transformers. And so it was exactly the same reason why I started learning how to make transformers and investing into CNC winders, both toroidal and bobbin transformers. Because when I started thinking about ribbon microphones, it was one or another. Whether I did not like the existing transformers, or I could not afford high quality transformers, and especially for the line. I mean, it is okay for one microphone, but when you are making a line of transformers and when you sell the microphones by hundreds, you need to also to think about, as a manufacturer, you have to think about final cost and all those things. So transformers also were a natural continuation of my
let's call it obsession with sonic fidelity.
yes, yes, yeah, you could say so, very much so. Yeah, and once you start with that, you go already to the end.
Yeah, you have to see it through, and it's cool because you can combine your individual you can tune essentially your transformer designs for the microphones they're going in, which is such a huge advantage, because transformers with their resonances, you can really pair it elegantly with your designs.
Yeah, and also not only that, also you can build into the transformer the very important parameters of entire microphones. And also you can control the low end, you can control the top end, and you can control the load on the ribbon itself. So
oh yeah, that is true. It does kind of go as its own kind of circuit design in how it works with a ribbon a little bit. Yeah.
What I mean, the transformer in the ribbon microphone is two-way design. So it goes out, but also the loading impedance of preamplifier through the transformer translates back into the ribbon, and this can affect the sound significantly. So to make it is not enough to take very good, let's say, ribbon motor, then get very good ribbon transformer, and then expect them to work well together.
It takes expertise. It takes understanding of the whole.
Yes, it's basically any microphone is a system. So when every component needs to be optimized working with next component, that's why well, you see, and that's the thing. Ribbon microphones, if we are talking about those, they are very forgiving devices, and you can even take a thick foil, kind of slap a transformer out of Walmart transformer, and still you can get not good but very decent microphone. But the thing is, when we are talking about highly optimized system, then every little detail like that makes a huge difference, especially when they add up together. It's it's an art.
They say that the last 80% of the work is to chase the last 20% of quality. I think that's a really fair kind of.
Well, I disagree, because I would say it would be 95 versus 5.
You'd go even further. Yeah, I think that Yeah, the last level of polish and finesse oftentimes is where the
Yes,
last bits of
and
optimization are. Yeah.
as they say, evil is in detail, and
Hmm.
this is probably the best example of that
Yeah,
principle.
absolutely. So as far as your current line of microphones, I'll just like to talk a little bit about each of those, just briefly. MF65, one of the best ribbon microphones and microphones in general money can buy. Beautifully, beautifully engineered and manufactured in Salt Lake City, where you're at. And you have a couple of others in your line. Let me see if I can do these from memory. Let's see. One of them is the 373.
Yes, which 373 is stereo version of VL37, and VL37 based on MF65. It basically it is a scaled down version of MF65. Just to the reason for that one, we wanted to make this kind of MF65 classic sound to be accessible for much wider audience, and
Mm-hmm.
it is much less expensive, so more people can afford it.
It's interesting that but I was talking with Rok Ulich, who does the headphone company Allo Audio, and he mentioned something similar where he's like, after a certain point, what you pay for in these in these pieces of equipment is that you're paying for a lot of the stuff that's not necessarily directly related to the sound quality, but it's still very valuable for a professional, right? Like the
Yes,
warranty and the overall build quality and the little fits and finishes that are worth it to people that want to go that extra distance for the quality of what they're purchasing.
absolutely, yes. And so we had to strip of MF65 the integral stainless steel shock mount, which by itself looks like people call it. I don't remember, at one of AAS shows, somebody told that it looks like a high precision medical instrument.
I would say that nice stainless steel can sometimes have that effect.
Oh,
For
yes.
sure. I mean, they're gorgeous microphones. Anyone listening should definitely check out the Samar audio design stuff. I mean, me talking about it doesn't do it justice. The beautiful kind of almost like honeycomb pattern on the grill. It's really beautiful looking stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So basically, BL37, it's scaled down version. And let's say it probably has about 90% of MF65 performance.
Yeah, and it's
But
similar
still,
to
people,
what we were
yeah,
saying. Yeah,
still people invest, people still pay money to get that extra 10%.
yeah. I mean, it makes
I
sense
mean,
why,
for
right?
MF65.
It makes sense. There's a certain point where that's what you're really spending your money on with luxury products, right? When you have something that's a flagship, it is that extra 10% that you're, like we were
Yes,
saying before, 95% versus 5%.
exactly.
It's
Yes.
it really does work that way when you're dealing with audio equipment.
Yes. So,
And
but NVL 373 is just a stereo version, which is also very important, because when you take two single microphones, you just cannot make the motors close enough to each other to avoid
yeah, you want perfect phase
the
coherence.
distance.
Yep.
Because the more the distance between the motors, the more the lower the cutoff frequency of phase
That makes sense
anomalies.
in a room. Yep.
Yes. So, and the VL373 actually has our AL959,
Hmm.
which has a piston ribbon, as we talked.
Yeah, the AL95 and AL959 look really incredible, especially for the cost you're offering them.
Yeah, that was, I really liked this model as well. And even it is much cheaper, but I still love it as my baby.
I think that your microphones are really built with this cost no object innovation, and I think that you just make things, efficient in different ways. You're not cutting costs, you're not making lower end models of things. You're just figuring out these kind of points of efficiency that you can drop the cost on.
Yes, and this is, I think, you see, when I was making our first MF65, I at that time I even didn't know how to machine things. So, and it was a nightmare. Like we were waiting the parts 9 months
Yeah. It's
when
time
we
to
were
learn.
making.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we were making the first couple batches, so that's when I decided, well, it's not going to work like that. And then when I started learning how to machine myself, when I started learning how to write the programs for the machining, I was applying the same critical thinking. Why it should not be like that. It can be much more efficient or much easier to make or machine, and that you can do those things only when you really understand what
Yep.
machining is and
Doing it yourself.
how.
Yep.
Yeah, when you do it yourself, because I think many manufacturers, they have very different, and I think one of the reasons why they rather do this using off-shelf available microphone bodies. That's why, like many modern microphones look exactly the same, because they basically get the bodies from the same source. The same with capsules and
Yeah.
so forth. But when you learn to do it yourself, and if you have this kind of critical thinking of how to improve the design, then it really helps you to understand the entire, like, for example, when I start working on the new model, I don't even start making anything until I have entire concept in my head. And this entire concept includes sonics, acoustics of the microphone, and also how to physically make it and how to physically make it happen.
You totally touch on some important concepts there. Speaking of that, with the MG series of condenser microphones that you've put out, a lot of care was put into the actual acoustic properties of the housing itself, and that can only really be accomplished from understanding and doing your own machining, or hiring someone to do something to a very specific concept, using acoustic lensing on the back of the casing behind the capsule to really get a beautiful linear off-axis response, is something that all of your small diaphragm condensers do.
Well, not only small diaphragm, but
and the large ones,
diaphragm.
Perhaps we should get into that a little bit, as far as the MG20 is a transformer coupled model. The MG32 and 33 are transformerless models that differ in shape. And what can you tell us, if I'm at liberty to ask, do you have any upcoming models that you're at liberty to share details about, or what's next for Samar?
It's quite easy for me because, I have 1,000 of ideas in my head, but I can talk about those which we already introduced produced at the last NAM.
Oh yeah, I was paying very close attention. Really interesting stuff.
Yes, so you mentioned the off-axis response, and I cannot stress enough the importance of the off-axis, because in my opinion, off-axis is probably 98% of microphone sound. That's why I pay such a close attention to this acoustical environment which capsule is put. Because acoustics around the capsules, they completely shape off-axis response.
Absolutely. And it's picking up what's in a room. Yeah, it's, these aren't isolated ways to capture sound. When you have a microphone, it's a simple overall way they work, right? They capture the sound in a space.
Yes, but the venting behind the capsule is at this point is my main focus, because it affects the sound tremendously. For example, if you take a regular tube, like a regular small diaphragm microphone, right? There is a tube, there is a capsule, there are holes around the body, which is an open aperture for the back wave to reach the back of the diaphragm for the cardioid pattern. The main problem with that, there is those holes and the body of the microphone, they shape a chamber. And this chamber effectively changes the sound. It's like, for example, to see how it affects, you can take a pencil microphone and then bring your hand close to those holes in the body, and you can hear how the sound and sonics already changed.
Oh, immediately.
Yes, and so that's why I am trying to, and in all of those designs you mentioned, MG20, MG32, and MG33, if you paid attention, there are no holes in the body. The back of the capsule is basically exposed and opened. So, and the body of the microphone itself forms an acoustic lens, which allows to get rid of all those reflections and all those chambers.
Absolutely.
And exactly the same principle we are applying to our next large diaphragm condenser microphones.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm excited for that Samar large diaphragm offering on the horizon. And I can't wait to hear more about that in the upcoming months with announcements. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It was truly a pleasurable experience on my end.
Oh, the same here. It's always very nice kind of to gather all my thoughts about that at certain point and be able to express what you think about that, and what you think about microphones, and what you think about how to move it forward rather than get stuck in what everyone else is doing.
Wonderful. Thanks for tuning in to the Audio Equipment Podcast. Tune in next time for more great interviews with gear manufacturers and creators.